The night was heavy with silence, broken only by the sound of angry voices in the dusty village streets. Torches burned in rough hands, shadows danced on the walls, and in the middle of it all was a frightened alien woman, her silver hair tangled with dirt, her arms held tightly by two men dragging her forward. "Thief!" they shouted. "Curse of our village!" Others joined, spitting on the ground as she passed. Children hid behind their mothers, and old men shook their heads. Nobody looked at her with pity. Nobody wanted to hear her cry. She tried to speak, her voice shaking. "I did not steal, I swear, please believe me." But her words were drowned by the cruel laughter around her. She stumbled on the stones, her thin feet bleeding, yet the men dragged her without care. At the edge of the village stood an old well, broken stones around its rim, and a smell of rot rising from its depths. It was no place for water anymore, only filth and forgotten waste. "Throw her in," a voice commanded, and the crowd cheered as if it were a festival. The woman's eyes widened, glowing faintly in the torchlight, fear and despair mixing in her gaze. She tried once more to beg, "Please, I am not guilty, I am not cursed." But her voice cracked. Her hands reached toward the crowd, yet nobody reached back. With a rough push, they sent her over the edge. Her scream cut through the night, long and sharp, echoing against the stone walls as her body fell. The sound of her crash was swallowed by the darkness below. Then came silence, only the distant drip of water deep inside the well. The crowd leaned forward, some laughed, some whispered prayers. "Good riddance," said an old woman. "May the darkness keep her." And one by one they turned away, their torches moving like stars into the distance until the street was empty again. Down in the darkness, the alien woman lay in the filth, mud and cold water clinging to her body aching, her breath shallow. She tried to move, but pain shot through her legs. Her arms shook as she pulled herself against the stone wall. The air was damp and full of rot. She coughed and whispered, "Help me, please, somebody." Above her, the night was silent. No one answered. Her voice echoed back at her, as if mocking. Her tears mixed with the dirty water. She pressed her forehead against the rough stone, whispering again, "I do not want to die here." Far away, in another part of the village, a human janitor walked slowly home. His day had been long, his hands still sore from cleaning the machines at the station. His old lantern swung in his hand, casting a faint circle of light on the road. He wanted nothing more than to rest, but then he stopped. A sound reached him, faint, almost too soft to notice. It was not the wind, not the call of night insects. It was a voice, weak and trembling. Carried on the air, he frowned, turned his head and listened. Again he heard it. "Help me." The janitor's heart tightened. He followed the sound, his boots crunching on the stones. The village was dark now. Everyone had gone to their homes. Only the smell of smoke and dust remained. The voice grew clearer as he neared the broken well. He stopped at the edge, lifted his lantern and peered down. At first he saw only blackness, then faintly two glowing eyes looking back up at him. Not with anger, but with fear and pain. Her voice rose once more. "Please do not leave me here." For a long moment, the janitor stood in silence, the night around him heavy. His mind echoed with the warnings he had heard before. Do not trust her. She is cursed. She is dangerous. Yet his heart told him something else. He tightened his grip on the lantern and whispered to himself, "No one deserves to die alone in the dark." The alien woman reached her trembling hand toward the faint light above, her voice almost gone now. "Please." The janitor's breath was unsteady, his tired eyes staring into the well. And though his body was weary from work, he felt a fire inside him. A choice was waiting for him here, a choice no one else dared to make. The night was quiet, but his heart pounded like thunder. He stepped closer to the well, leaned over the edge, and called softly, "Hold on, I hear you." Her eyes widened, glowing brighter with sudden hope, and for the first time that night she believed she might not be alone. The silence of the village returned, but now it carried a secret. In the depth of the filthy well, a cry for help had been answered, not by many, not by the powerful, but by one tired human who stayed behind when everyone else turned away. And the night, heavy with darkness, shifted, as if holding its breath for what would come next. The janitor stood at the edge of the broken well, his lantern shaking slightly in his tired hand. The light flickered against the cracked stones. The night air was cold and the silence pressed heavy on him. Yet from below, the faint voice rose again, weak but steady. "Please do not leave me here." His chest tightened. He knew the stories. Everyone in the village had warned about the alien woman. They said she was cursed, that her glowing skin marked her as dangerous. They believed she stole food, that she brought sickness. But as he listened to her voice echoing in the dark, he did not hear danger. He only heard pain. He leaned closer, his lantern sending a narrow beam into the pit. There she was, huddled against the damp stones, her arms trembling, her silver hair sticking to her face. The glowing lines on her skin pulsed faintly like fading fireflies. Her eyes lifted to him, full of fear and hope. The janitor's throat was dry, he whispered. "I hear you." Though, his voice shook, her hands reached upward though she could not touch him. The gesture was desperate, almost childlike. He stepped back and looked around, but the street was empty. The villagers had gone to their beds, their doors locked, their minds at peace. They had left her to die. "Don't," she whispered again, her voice echoing from the stones. "Don't go." He froze, his heart pounding. He thought of walking away. It would be easier, safer, if the others found out he had helped her. They would curse him too. They would call him traitor. Yet he could not silence the sound of her trembling words. He set his lantern on the ground, the flame glowing like a small star in the dust. He pulled off the rope coiled around his shoulder. It was old, frayed from years of work, but it would have to do. Slowly he lowered it into the darkness, his arms straining as the rope scraped the stones. "Take it," he called softly. "Hold tight." For a moment she hesitated, her hand hovering, as if she could not believe anyone would truly help her. Then with trembling fingers, she grabbed the rope, her grip weak but desperate. She wrapped it around her arm, clutching it like life itself. The janitor braced his feet against the stones, sweat already on his brow. His back ached from long work, yet he pulled with all his strength. The rope cut into his palms, but he gritted his teeth and leaned back inch by inch. The woman rose from the filth of the well, her body heavy, her breath ragged. Above them, the moon slid from behind a cloud, its pale light spilling across the scene. The village slept, unaware of the struggle happening in the shadows. The janitor's arms shook, but he pulled again. Her glowing eyes fixed on him, never looking away. At last, her hand reached the edge of the stones, her nails scraping against them. He bent down, grabbed her wrist and pulled her up with one final effort. She collapsed beside him, coughing, mud and water dripping from her clothes, her chest rising and falling quickly. For a moment, neither spoke. Only the sound of her coughing and his heavy breathing filled the night. Then she turned her head toward him, her voice hoarse but full of raw gratitude. "You came back." The janitor swallowed hard, his hands still shaking. "I couldn't walk away," he said simply. She looked at him with wide eyes, tears mixing with the mud on her face. "Nobody listens to me. Nobody believes me." He wanted to answer. But footsteps echoed in the distance, faint but sharp. His heart jumped. He quickly pulled the lantern closer and shielded its light with his body. He knew if the villagers found them here, they would both be in danger. "Come," he whispered, helping her to her feet. Though her legs trembled badly, she leaned against him, her weight heavy on his shoulder. Slowly, carefully, he guided her away from the well, through the narrow back paths of the village. Night was still, but every shadow felt alive. Every creak of wood and whisper of wind made him glance over his shoulder. The woman's breathing was shallow. She struggled with every step, but her eyes never left his face, as if afraid he would disappear. They passed a small shrine, its candles long burned out. He paused to rest, setting her down gently on the stone step. She coughed again, clutching her chest. The glowing patterns on her arms flickered faintly. The janitor knelt beside her, his voice low. "Why do they fear you?" Her lips trembled as she spoke. They say my markings bring sickness. They say I cursed their harvest when I touched the grain. But I only tried to help. Her voice broke. I never stole from them. I only wanted to survive. The janitor looked at her glowing arms. The light was soft, not frightening. He shook his head slowly. Fear makes people cruel, he whispered. She lowered her head, her tears dropping onto the stone. I thought I would die down there alone. His hand hovered uncertainly. Then he placed it gently on her shoulder. Not tonight, he said firmly. The woman closed her eyes, as if his words carried more weight than the rope that had pulled her free. Above them, the stars spread wide, silent witnesses to a choice no one else dared to make. And as the janitor helped her up again, guiding her toward his small home at the edge of the village, he knew there was no turning back. The small room smelled of oil and old wood. It was the janitor's home, simple and poor, with only one bed, a broken chair, and a lantern that barely lit the corners. He pushed the door open with his shoulder, helping the alien woman step inside. Her legs shook with every step, her arms weak, but her eyes scanned the room with quiet fear. He lowered her onto the chair, steadying her so she would not fall. She looked so fragile, her clothes soaked with mud, her skin covered in scratches. Yet even in her weakness, the glowing patterns on her arms shimmered faintly, like hidden stars. Under her skin, the janitor crouched in front of her, his voice low. You are safe now, he said, though he was not sure if it was true. The village was full of suspicion, full of eyes that watched even when doors were closed. Her lips parted, her voice broken and soft. Why did you help me? Her eyes searched his face, as if waiting for the answer that made no sense to her. He hesitated, then shook his head, slowly, because no one else would. Her breath trembled, her hands gripping the edge of the chair. They hate me, they call me thief, they call me curse, I am nothing to them, she whispered, tears rising again. The janitor rose and poured water from a clay jar into a small cup. He handed it to her. Her hands shook as she held it, drinking, slowly, her throat dry from crying and filth. When the water touched her lips, she closed her eyes, relief washing over her. He watched silently, his calloused hands resting on his knees, his thoughts heavy. He had done something dangerous, something no one else would forgive. But when he looked at her, when he saw the glow of her eyes, he felt no regret, only a strange weight, as if fate had placed her in his care. Outside, the night pressed close. The sound of distant dogs barking echoed through the village. The janitor's gaze shifted to the window. Shadows moved faintly, but he forced himself to stay calm. He turned back to her. You should rest. She shook her head weakly, her voice breaking. If I close my eyes, I see the well. I hear them. Laughing, I feel the darkness pulling me down again. Her body trembled, her hands clutching the cup as if it could anchor her. The janitor's jaw tightened. He reached for an old blanket and draped it across her shoulders. You are not there anymore, he said firmly. You are here, with me. Her glowing eyes lifted to him, and for a moment, the fear in them softened. Her lips moved, as if she wanted to thank him, but no words came. Instead, she leaned back slowly, letting the blanket cover her like a shield. He sat across from her, the lantern between them casting soft light. The silence stretched, broken only by her shallow breathing. Then she spoke, her words slow. They think I stole from them, but I did not. I swear on my life. The janitor leaned forward, his brow furrowed. Then why would they throw you into the well? Her eyes lowered, the glow of her markings faint. Because of this, she whispered, lifting her arm, the patterns on her skin glowing faintly. They say these markings bring sickness. That they ruin crops, that I carry misfortune. Her voice cracked. But I never harmed anyone. He studied the light on her skin, not with fear, but with curiosity. It does not look like a curse, he said. It looks beautiful. She looked at him in surprise. No one had ever said such words to her before. Her chest rose and fell quickly. Her lips trembled. You don't fear me? He shook his head. No, he answered simply. The woman covered her face, with her hands, sobbing quietly. but her sobs carried both sorrow and relief, as if a weight she had carried alone for years had been lifted just a little. The janitor's heart ached. He reached out and gently pulled her hands away. "Do not cry," he whispered. "You have suffered enough." Suddenly, a noise outside broke the fragile calm. Footsteps crunched against the dirt. Low voices murmured. The janitor quickly rose, blowing out the lantern until the room was swallowed in darkness. He moved to the window, peering through a crack. 2. Men walked past, torches in their hands, their voices sharp. "She cannot have gone far. If someone helped her, we will find them." The alien woman froze, her breath caught, fear flashing in her glowing eyes. The janitor turned back to her, motioning for silence. He pressed a finger to his lips. She nodded weakly, clutching the blanket tighter. The footsteps grew faint, fading into the night. But the warning was clear. They would search. They would not stop. When the silence returned, the janitor lit the lantern again, its weak glow chasing away the shadows. He looked at her firmly. "They will come again. You cannot stay here long." Her lips parted, panic rising. "Will you send me away too?" she whispered. The janitor stared at her, then shook his head, his voice steady despite the danger. "No, I will not." Her eyes widened, shimmering with tears. "Why?" He took a deep breath, his words slow. "Because, when everyone else turned their back, I could not. Because your cry reached me and I cannot pretend I did not hear it." Her hand trembled as it touched the blanket. Pulling it tighter around her, she whispered, "Then you will be hunted too." The janitor gave a tired smile. "I have been invisible all my life. No one cared if I was hungry or tired. But tonight, for the first time, I feel like what I do matters." The alien woman stared at him, and in that quiet moment something fragile but strong began to form between them. Trust born not from promises but from a single act of kindness in the shadows. The night outside still carried danger. The voices of hatred would return. But inside that small wooden room, hope flickered for the first time, like the lantern flame, fighting the darkness. And as she finally leaned her head back, closing her glowing eyes, she whispered softly, "You rescued me." Her words barely louder than breath, yet they filled the room with warmth. The janitor looked at her, tired but unshaken, and whispered back, "And I will not stop now." The night stretched on, quiet but heavy. The janitor sat at the edge of his wooden bed, the lantern casting a small circle of light across the room. The alien woman lay wrapped in the old blanket, her body still trembling from weakness, but her glowing eyes followed every movement he made. She had not spoken for a while, only breathed softly, clutching the blanket like a shield. The janitor reached into a small box and pulled out a piece of bread, hard and stale from yesterday, but it was all he had. He warmed it slightly over the lantern flame and placed it on a tin plate, then filled another small cup with water. He placed them before her, his voice gentle. "Eat." Her eyes widened, her lips parted as if to protest. "For me," she whispered, her voice almost broken. He nodded. "You need strength." She stared at the bread for a long moment, her hands trembling before she reached out. She picked it up slowly, almost reverently, as if the simple gift was too precious to touch. When she bit into it, her eyes filled with tears. She chewed slowly, her throat working hard as she swallowed. "Between bites," she whispered. "I have not eaten in 2 days. They refused to sell me food. They said I should starve." The janitor's hands tightened on his knees, anger flickering in his chest. But he kept his voice calm. "You will not starve here." Her glowing markings pulsed faintly as she finished the bread. The light seemed to shift with her emotions, sometimes dimming with sorrow, sometimes brightening with relief. She drank, the water slowly, every sip a reminder that she was still alive. When she was done, she leaned back, whispering, "Why are you doing this? You owe me nothing. If they find out, they will punish you too." The janitor leaned forward, his tired eyes steady. "Because kindness should not be rare. Because no, one deserves to be left in a hole to die." Her lips trembled, her glowing eyes blinked fast as tears gathered. "I thought my voice would be lost forever in that well. I thought no one would hear me, but you did." He nodded slowly. I heard, and I could not ignore it. The silence stretched between them, heavy but warm. Then she spoke again, her words halting. My name is Leora, she whispered. That is what my people once called me. The janitor repeated it softly, as if testing the sound. Leora? He gave a small nod. I am Marin. Her lips curved faintly, the first shadow of a smile on her face. Marin, she repeated, her voice gentler than before. For a moment, the dark room felt lighter, the weight of fear slipping away just enough to let them breathe. But outside, the danger had not passed. The distant echo of voices still lingered in the night. Marin stood and moved to the window, peering through the crack, only shadows and the glow of torches fading in the distance. He exhaled slowly, returning to his chair. You cannot stay, hidden forever, he said quietly. The village will search, and if they find you here, they will destroy us both. Her fingers clutched the blanket tighter, fear returning to her eyes. Then send me away, she whispered, her voice shaking. I do not want you to suffer because of me. Marin shook his head firmly. No, I will not send you back into the cold streets, not after what they have done. Her breath caught, she stared at him as if she had not heard such words in her life. You would risk everything. He looked at her without hesitation. Yes. Her glowing patterns shimmered, faintly, brighter now, as if reflecting the heat of her emotions. She lowered her head, her tears falling silently, not from pain this time, but from a fragile gratitude she could not speak. The room grew quiet again, the lantern flame flickering against the walls. Marin leaned back against the bed, exhaustion pulling at him. But he kept his eyes on her as if making sure she would not vanish if he looked away. At last she whispered, When I was young, my mother told me that kindness was the rarest gift. She said it was the only thing that could break fear. But I never believed her. Not until now. Marin gave a faint smile, tired, but honest. Your mother was right. Her voice grew soft. They never saw me as anything but a curse, but you see me as someone. He shook his head gently. Not someone, Leora. I see you as human. Her eyes widened, her glowing light brightening at his words. She pressed her hand to her chest as if holding the feeling close. No one had ever spoken to her that way. No one had ever given her such dignity. Outside, the night wind howled softly through the cracks of the roof. But inside, something new filled the air. Not fear, not despair, but the fragile warmth of trust. Marin closed his eyes for a brief moment, his tired body begging for rest. But his mind refused. He knew the village would not forgive. He knew danger was coming. Yet when he opened his eyes and saw her sitting there, alive and breathing, he felt no regret. Leora leaned her head back against the chair. Her glowing eyes half closed, she whispered as if to herself, Maybe I was thrown into that well so that you would find me. Marin did not answer, but in his heart, he wondered the same. And as the lantern burned low, two strangers sat in the shadows, no longer strangers, bound together by one act of kindness that defied an entire village. The first light of dawn crept through the cracks of the wooden roof, painting the room with pale silver. Marin had not slept, his eyes heavy but always watching. Every creak of the floorboards and every whisper of the wind kept him alert. Across from him, Leora sat wrapped in the blanket, her glowing markings faint under the weak morning light. She stirred slowly, blinking as the light touched her face. For a moment she looked peaceful, but then she pulled the blanket tighter around. Her arms, as if trying to hide the shimmering lines, Marin noticed and spoke softly. You do not need to hide them. Her eyes flickered toward him, uncertain. These markings are the reason they hate me, she whispered, her voice heavy with shame. Everywhere I go, people see them and turn away. They call me cursed. They spit at me. They believe the light means death. He leaned forward, his rough hands resting on his knees, his voice steady. I do not see death. I see life. Her breath caught, her lips parted. Life, she repeated as if the word was strange to her. Marin nodded. Your light is not something to fear. It is part of who you are. and there is nothing cursed in that. For a long moment she stared at him, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. No one had ever spoken to her like this. No one had ever given her the dignity to see beauty where others only saw danger. She pulled the blanket away slowly, exposing her arms. The markings glowed brighter in the morning shade, flowing in delicate patterns like rivers of silver fire. Across her skin they pulsed softly with each heartbeat. Maren reached out his hand, hesitating before asking, "May I?" Her lips trembled, but she nodded. His fingers brushed her arm gently, rough from years of labor, yet careful as if touching something fragile. The glow warmed under his touch, not with heat, but with a strange comfort. Leora gasped softly, her eyes wide. "No one has ever touched me without fear," she whispered. Maren's voice was quiet but strong. "Fear blinds them, but I will not let it blind me." Tears spilled down her cheeks. She turned her face away, ashamed of her own weakness. But Maren only sat closer, his presence steady like the earth itself. Suddenly, the sound of distant voices carried through the thin walls, harsh and angry. Maren rose quickly, moving to the window. Through the crack he saw villagers gathered in the street, their faces tight with suspicion, torches in their hands even though the sun was rising. "They are searching," he muttered, his heart heavy. Leora stiffened, clutching the blanket again, her glowing arms hidden once more. Fear raced through her eyes. "They will kill me if they find me here," she whispered. "And you too." Maren turned back, his jaw tight. "Then we will not let them find you." He moved quickly, pushing the chair against the wall. Pulling an old rug aside, beneath it was a loose plank. He lifted it to reveal a hollow space barely large enough for her to crouch. "Hide here until they leave." She shook her head, her voice breaking. "You should not suffer for me. Let me go. Let them take me. It is my fate." Maren stepped closer, his voice sharp with defiance. "No, do not speak of fate. You are alive because you deserve to live, and as long as I breathe, they will not take you." Her glowing eyes locked onto his, and in that moment she saw not just kindness but strength. The strength of a man who had nothing yet chose to give everything. The pounding of fists on doors echoed through the street, angry voices shouting, "Search every house. She cannot vanish." Maren motioned urgently. "Go, quickly." Reluctantly, Leora lowered herself into the hollow, her glowing markings dimming as if trying to hide. He placed the plank back and covered it with the rug, his chest tight, his ears straining to catch her faint breathing beneath the floor. Moments later, the door burst open. 3 villagers stormed in, their faces twisted with anger. "Maren!" one barked. "Have you seen her, the cursed thief?" Maren stood tall, his expression blank. "I have seen no one," he said, his voice calm despite his racing heart. They searched the small room, overturning the chair, pulling open the box. One of them even lifted the blanket from the bed, but they found nothing. Their frustration grew. One man stepped close, his eyes narrowing. "If you hide her, you will share her fate." Maren's gaze did not waver. "I hide no one," he repeated, his words firm. After a tense silence, the men spat on the floor and left, slamming the door behind them, their voices fading as they moved to the next house. Maren exhaled slowly, his hands shaking now that the danger had passed. He bent down and lifted the plank. Leora's glowing eyes peered up at him, wide with fear and relief. He helped her out carefully, her body trembling. "They would have killed you," she whispered, her voice weak. "And me too," he added, his tired smile faint but true. "But they did not." She looked at him with awe, her voice trembling. "Why? Why do you risk so much?" Maren's answer was simple, his voice low but unbreakable. "Because you are not a curse. You are not an outcast to me." Her tears fell again, but this time they carried something more than sorrow. They carried hope, fragile yet alive. The morning sun poured through the cracks, lighting the room, and for the first time, Leora let her arms remain uncovered, her glowing markings shining fully in the light, not as a curse, but as a sign of survival. And in that quiet moment, though the world outside hated her, inside Maren's Small home, she was no longer an outcast. She was seen. She was valued. She was free, if only for a little while. The sun slipped below the horizon, and the village streets glowed with the orange of many torches. The cries of men, women, and even children filled the air. They shouted the same words again and again. Curse, thief, monster. The noise shook the walls of Marin's small house. Inside, Leora sat near the corner, her glowing arms hidden beneath the old blanket once more, her eyes wide with fear, the marks on her skin pulsing faintly like frightened fireflies. She whispered, "They are coming for me." Her voice cracked as she clutched the blanket tighter. Marin stood at the window, watching the torches gather outside, his tired hands gripping the wooden frame. His heart beat hard in his chest. He could see the villagers forming a circle, their faces twisted with anger. Some carried ropes, others sharp tools. They wanted justice, or what they thought was justice. "They will burn the house if they believe you are here," Leora said weakly. "You must send me away, or they will destroy you too." Marin turned toward her, his eyes steady though his body trembled with exhaustion. "I will not hand you to them, not now, not ever." Her glowing eyes filled with tears. She shook her head. "Why do you fight for me?" "I am nothing to them, I am nothing to you." Marin stepped closer, kneeling beside her, his voice firm. "You are not nothing. You are someone who cried for help when no one else listened. And I heard you. That is enough for me." Outside, the pounding began. Fists slammed against the wooden door. Angry voices roared, "Open, Marin, we know she is inside. Bring her out or face our wrath." The walls shook, the sound of hatred filling every corner of the small room. Leora covered her ears, trembling. Marin rose, his jaw tight. He moved to the door but did not open it. Instead, he spoke loud enough for them to hear. "She is not what you believe. She is no curse, no thief." The crowd howled in rage. "Lies, lies. You protect the monster, you are cursed too." The voices blended into a storm, a sea of fury that pressed against the fragile wooden walls. A stone crashed through the window, shards scattering across the floor. Leora cried out, flinching as the glass sparkled around her feet. Marin rushed to shield her, pulling her away from the corner. "They will kill us," she whispered, her voice broken. "They will not stop until I am gone." Marin's eyes burned with defiance. "Then let them come, but they will not take you while I stand." He grabbed the iron rod he used for work. Holding it tightly in his hand, his palms sweaty but steady, he positioned himself in front of her, the storm of voices outside pounding like thunder. The door shook as fists slammed against it, again and again. "Open, or we break it down," they shouted. Leora's tears streamed down her face, her glowing markings pulsing faster, brighter, the light spilling through the blanket. "Marin," she whispered, her voice desperate. "If they see me like this glowing, they will believe even more that I am cursed." But Marin turned and looked at her, his voice steady despite the storm. "Then let them see what they fear, and maybe they will finally learn the truth." The door burst open with a crack, the wood splintering as angry villagers surged inside, their torches blazing, their faces twisted with hatred. They stopped for a moment when they saw Marin standing firm, the iron rod in his hands, his body shielding the alien woman behind him. "She is mine to protect," Marin said, his voice like iron. "If you want her, you must go through me." The crowd roared, stepping closer. But then something unexpected happened. The blanket slipped from Leora's shoulders. The glowing markings on her arms shone brightly in the torchlight, casting strange silver patterns across the walls. Gasps filled the room. Some villagers stepped back in shock, their voices faltering. The glow was not wild or dangerous. It was calm, soft, like light dancing on water. The children in the crowd stared with wide eyes, not in fear, but in awe. "She is not cursed," Marin shouted, his voice carrying over the silence. "She is different, yes, but difference is not a curse." For a moment the crowd hesitated, torn between fear and doubt. But then an old man raised his hand, pointing. "Her light brings death, do not be fooled." The anger rose again, voices shouting, "Burn them both, end the curse." Torches were lifted higher. The storm returned, Stronger than before, Leora clutched Marin's arm, her voice trembling. They will not listen. They only know hatred. Her eyes filled with despair. Please do not die for me. Marin turned his head, his tired eyes softening as he looked at her. If I fall for something worth saving, he whispered. The storm of hatred outside the small room grew louder. The crowd pressed closer, flames licking the wooden walls. The night itself seemed to hold its breath, and in the center of it all stood one weary human and one trembling alien, bound together by kindness, facing a sea of rage, their fates uncertain, their courage unbroken. The room shook with the roar of the crowd. Flames from their torches licked against the wooden walls. The air grew thick with smoke and anger. Marin stood in front of Leora, his hands gripping the iron rod, his back straight even though fear pounded in his chest behind him. Leora trembled, her glowing markings pulsing brighter with every heartbeat. The villagers shouted, "Burn them! End the curse!" Their voices blending into one furious storm. Children cried, women screamed, men pushed forward with ropes and sticks. The hatred was alive, fierce, ready to destroy. Marin raised his voice, strong despite the chaos. You see only fear, but look again. Look at her light. The villagers hesitated for a moment, their eyes drawn to Leora. Her markings glowed like rivers of silver fire, not wild, not violent, but calm, beautiful. The glow spread across her arms, her neck, her face, filling the small house with a strange silver warmth. Gasps echoed, the children stopped crying, staring with wide eyes. One small boy tugged at his mother's sleeve and whispered, "She looks like the stars." But the old man in the front growled, lifting his torch higher, "It is a trick, her light brings ruin. Do not be fooled." At that moment, a sharp cry cut through the noise. A woman from the crowd rushed forward, holding a limp child in her arms, the boy's face pale, his breath shallow. "He is dying," she screamed. "No healer can help, please somebody." The villagers turned, their anger faltering for a moment. The woman's tears glistened in the torchlight. She knelt on the ground, rocking the boy desperately. Leora's glowing eyes widened. She stepped forward, though Marin tried to hold. Her back, her voice steady but soft. "Let me," the crowd hissed, pulling the woman away. "No, do not let her touch him. She will kill him." But the mother's voice rose above them, raw with despair. "If he dies anyway, let her try." The crowd fell into uneasy silence, the torches flickering as doubt spread. Leora knelt beside the child, her trembling hands reaching out, her glowing markings brightening as she touched his chest gently. Marin stood close, ready to shield her if anyone moved. For a long breath, nothing happened. Then the silver light pulsed brighter, flowing from her arms into the boy's body. The glow spread through his small frame like threads of starlight. The crowd held its breath, watching. The boy coughed suddenly, his chest rising, color returning faintly to his cheeks. His small hand gripped his mother's dress, whispering weakly, "Mama." The mother screamed with joy, clutching him close, tears streaming down her face. "He breathes, he lives," she cried. The crowd gasped, their anger breaking apart like waves against stone. Whispers spread. "She healed him. She is not cursed. She saved the child." The old man lowered his torch slowly, his lips trembling, but no words came. For the first time, his certainty faltered. Leora pulled her hands back, exhausted, her glow dimming. She swayed and nearly fell, but Marin caught her, steadying her gently. She looked up at him with tired eyes and whispered, "I only wanted to help." Marin's voice was firm, loud enough for all to hear. "You call her thief, you call her curse, but she gives life, she gives hope, and still you wish to kill her." The villagers shifted uneasily, shame mixing with fear. No one spoke, no one moved. Only the sound of the boy's weak breathing filled the air. Finally, the mother rose, holding her child close, her voice breaking. "She saved him, and you would have left her to die. What kind of people are we?" One by one, the torches lowered. The anger faded into silence. The crowd stepped back, unsure, afraid not of Leora, but of themselves. Marin turned to them, his eyes sharp. "You left her in the well, you turned away from her cries, but know this. I will not turn away, not now. Not ever. The villagers did not answer. Some left quietly, others stood frozen, unable to meet his gaze. The storm of hatred had broken, leaving only uneasy silence. Maren guided Leora back into the small house, away from the crowd. She leaned against him, her body weak, her glowing eyes filled with tears. They saw. They know now, she whispered. He nodded, helping her sit. Yes, but even if they never believed, I would still stay. Her lips trembled, her voice shaking. Why? Why do you stay when the world turns away? Maren looked at her with tired but steady eyes, his voice soft but unshakable. Because you are worth staying for. Her tears fell silently, glowing faintly under the silver markings of her face. She whispered. No one answered my cry. No one. Until you. Maren reached for her, trembling hand holding it gently. And I will never leave you. Leora, not while I draw breath. The night outside grew quiet, the villagers gone, the torches dimmed. But inside that broken little house, hope burned brighter than fire. And so, when hatred came like a storm, it was not anger or fear that survived. It was the kindness of a weary human who stayed, and the fragile light of an alien woman who refused to die alone.